All right. This is the Dad Speak podcast.
What? This is the what podcast?
The Dad Speak
I
podcast.
think I'm on the wrong podcast.
Steven Freeborn. He's a barrel of laughs, ladies. and
Okay,
gentlemen.
take two.
Take two. All right. This is the Dad Speak podcast. Podcast made by dads, but not exclusively for dads. I'm Jaxon Roberts. With me, as always, Steven Freeborn. And my dog's running all over the fucking place, so we're recording it.
Well, at least yours is not barking.
It's true. Give them a second. Well,
I'm here though. I am here. I'm here.
here.
Ready to do it.
Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, dude. Okay, so real quick, give us the recap on your week. That's becoming like the part of the standard podcast intro is like, Jaxon, how's your week been?
Very busy. Teaching wise, it's the end of the semester. End of the semester is always busy. It's like, everything's divided up into quarters. Quarters don't matter. It's an imaginary date that we use to stress out kids and parents.
That's what all deadlines are.
Yeah, they're made up.
They're made up. We're on the earth for like 70 years, but we got to have deadlines for everything.
Are you going to explode by this time? Then it's not a real deadline. But semesters are a little different. Semesters, you have to have all your grades in and have basically all your P's and Q's in order.
You haven't put anybody in a headlock yet, have you?
Not yet. I did have a kid who the other day told me at the beginning of class that I was his favorite teacher. And then he decided to yell at our resource officer. And I wrote him up and he got suspended for the rest of the semester.
What a roller coaster of emotions, man. That was like brought a tear to your eye, and then you had to whoop his ass.
You don't yell at the resource officer. He has a gun. That should be a given. He has the worst job out of all of us, so we're gonna keep him happy.
There's another valuable lesson we're trying to pass on to our children. If the man has a gun, don't yell at him. Whatever you do, just don't yell at him.
All of our fans, ladies and gentlemen, from Ireland to the Philippines, if you learn no lesson from this podcast, learn that. Don't yell at people with guns.
Gosh, man.
It's going to work in that Philippines reference every podcast now.
Those are an ongoing basis. Our one listener in the Philippines. I haven't checked the demographics in a while. I need to do that. I need to remember to do that.
I saw the other day on YouTube, we have 10 subscribers.
Heck yeah, look at that.
We're double digits now.
We're moving up in the world.
Love it.
Becoming fancy.
Yeah. We're going to start a Patreon page or something.
All right. I have a topic to get us started. This topic is going to be called Things You Didn't Know You Needed Until You Had Kids. And you have to go first.
I have to go first?
You have to go first.
I had a crazy day. I'm so unprepared. Things I didn't know I needed before I became a dad.
Oh my God. Podcast, what?
Yeah. Dude, I'll tell you once we're done recording here, my day is fucking ape shit. That's why my cursing is up right now. It's because I'm just done. So I'm gonna substitute regular kind words with cursing.
Well, that's basically how I live my life. So.
Kind of things I didn't know I needed before. The importance of wipes cannot be overstated in a parent. We have basically had wipes in our house constantly since we've been married, and I can't envision a world where we don't have wipes in our house. We use them for everything. Tell me I'm wrong.
They're like gold, but they're also like the goddamn Swiss Army knife in parenting.
Yeah.
He's bleeding. Get a wipe. He shit himself. Get a wipe.
It's like the counter's dirty. Well, give me a wipe.
Get a wipe. Exactly. No, we get on that note. We get a big giant. Like it looks like it came off straight off a pallet from Amazon. It just shows up in a it's a giant cardboard box full of baby wipes inside of another cardboard box that they shipped it in.
we currently, because we decided to stock up on diapers for over Christmas break. I think my wife's in the background. How many boxes we have? 4? Okay. Gabby Roberts, ladies and gentlemen.
We're down to one box and one size, so
that's dangerous.
We're feeling like we're kind of like seeing the light at the end of the diaper tunnel.
Not us. Yeah, no. Cora full on like took off her diaper and was like playing with a turd the other day. And, like the first thought though was, where are the wipes? I can't do this without wipes.
Honey, my day was a shit show. Get the wipes.
You know how we had the one guy contact us and be like, I'm really glad your podcast isn't just you guys complaining about changing diapers.
Yeah, all the guys are gone at this point.
My apologies, sir.
All right, my first one is okay. So, every time every new parent I meet, like everybody I hear, like, oh, we're getting ready for our first kid or whatever. I tell them about this thing, and you'll not ever know that you need it until you have a kid, and that is this device called a nose Frida, and it's for nasal aspiration. So like when your kid has a really stuffy nose.
Oh, okay.
And it's like a tube that you put up against their nostril, and then you suck through the tube and pull out their boogers. And you don't understand what it is to have a pain in the butt to have a kid with a stuffy running nose. And they don't like blow their nose like a normal human being. They don't understand it. And the only way you can get them relief is with clearing it out manually. And like the hospital tries to give you these little like bulb syringes, and them fuckers don't work. They just, I don't care.
We call ours, you use the proper like medical term for it. We just call ours the nose sucker.
Yeah, that's what we call ours too. And okay. My kids, every time I get this nose Frida thing out, they're always like, no, don't suck my nose. they like know what the device is. Oh, but I'm like, by God, you guys are going to stop wiping your nose everywhere, and you're going to sleep through the evening. So I'm going to suck your nose. I mean, but no, like, it's just one of those things that you're like, what? You have to do what? Like, and every time like someone sees us doing it, they'll be like, oh my God, I can't. And it's like, you just wait till you're in my shoes. You'll be sucking some noses too. You got any more?
So true. Things I didn't know I needed. Baby specific television programming. Now let me explain, because this is controversial one. It's like, you let your kids watch TV.
Jackson's like, what, honey? It's John Wick. I mean, it's totally appropriate.
No one likes Russians anyways. I say that one of my favorite professors at PSU is Russian. But
you're like, yeah, he used to be. But like,
she gave it up for Lent. No, it's like whenever Hayden was born, we found a channel on TV. It was called I don't know. We just called it the Baby Channel, and it was like 24 hours of just like baby specific program. And they make it all educational. Like, it's like we're learning our letters, we're learning colors and numbers. And sometimes we're learning Spanish and all this, that, and the other. And the reason I say that's important is because there are times where you have to have that trump card. And if the kid is freaking out, you're just like, gee, Okay, do you want to watch Cocomelon?
Hey,
yes, I'll watch Cocomelon.
look, you don't have to tell me, because basically when my kid like opened his eyes, I threw an iPad at him and said, "Here, check out YouTube." You're like over there, like, it's educational, it's good content. I'm like, here, put your eyeballs on this screen and just have a nice life.
Yeah, no, baby specific programming content.
It's true. It's very, and
So
what's so funny about that too is like the most random shit hits with them. Like the most weirdest stuff captures their attention. You're just like, this really? And they're just like glued to it. They're just like, it's crazy. Yeah. But your sanity is intact because of it.
It's weirder the older they get too, because like I'm way more freaked out about like what my 7-year-old watches, and we try to be pretty vigilant with that, but there's times where she's watching something, I was like, let's change it. She's like, this isn't inappropriate. I was like, yeah, but it's I feel weird watching this. It's like there's one of like this European family where like,
is it because it's Russians? Is it because it's Russians?
Is that what you're saying? I think they're Greek or something. I have no clue what they are. But it's like they just like do little skits and stuff like that. They all talk like this, and it's really funny. And I'm just like, why? I have no clue what's happening. I know you don't have any clue what's happening. What? Why?
I didn't know that there was specialized cleaners, little like to clean the bottles. Like when our kids were little, we had like one of those little like it had like it looks like a normal person's like dish cleaner thing, but it's like miniaturized and the bristles are really tiny. And I was just like,
if you had the Dr. Brown bottles.
Yes, we did. Yes. Yeah. And you're just like, and I was just like, when I saw it, I was just like, what? I don't need that, but you do need it. You do need it.
That's when you forget to get older. That's so true. I wonder, like, the amount of time I've spent like cleaning out little baby tubes for bottles.
Dude, I don't know. There's stuff that the other day I was just telling Kelsey, like, there's stuff that I wish I could go back sometimes and just like re-experience, because it seems like every year, whatever, that they get older, it's harder to like mentally recall, like, what did they smell like when they were a baby? What did they feel like when they were a baby? Like, it's just, you remember it, you remember the enjoyment of it, but it's really hard to like make it tangible. But like cleaning bottles is not one of those things at all.
Do you find, and this is kind of a little off topic, but something you said made me think of it. Do you find having the younger sibling makes you recall a little bit of the experiences of the first kid more?
It does, and unfortunately, I don't know, for me at least, Cal, sometimes at times, like with the oldest, it's at least just for me, I feel a constant struggle trying to balance who gets my attention. And I think because Cal has been here longer, and like he sometimes by default just gets a lot of interaction from me. And at times, like, I find myself kind of like, it's like I know that the stage of life that our youngest is in is quickly passing me, and it's like, I know it's more like, I know once that one is through those stages, I'm likely not going to get it again. So it's more of like, just, it's really forcing me to try to be as present and aware, and like trying to soak it all in and take it all in, because I know like very quickly that little like toddler baby like stage will be kind of like permanently gone, especially because like Kyler, our youngest, his words are starting to really like come to him. Like he's been, doing like one or two sentence one or two word sentences for a while now, but like now he's starting to like pick up more vocabulary and put more things together. And so I know like he's right on that cusp of kind of like tipping out of toddlerhood and more into like childhood.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something about them when they're real little like that, and they're that toddler age. They're kind of in between baby and in between kid, where it's just really fun. They're just super, super fun. And then once it's gone, it's gone. And I mean, there's things you miss about it, and there's things you don't. Like I'll be super excited when both of them are out of diapers, but I'll miss kind of like the little toddler stage a lot.
Yeah, that's one thing. Like a couple of things that like I'm trying to be thankful for. Like I'm not always happy when she wakes up in the middle of the night, but like if Cora wakes up and like really snuggles or cuddles into me, and then I sound like pushover dad right now, but it's true. If that happens, no, I'm just like, okay, this is a good
because
one.
As much as you want to think,
I know I'm finite with that right now. I only have a few more.
Yeah, and really like, I mean, that's really about like a lot of things with your kids is like the days feel so long, you kind of believe that it's going to go on endlessly. But like in the grand scheme of their life, like you're really only going to get 10, maybe 13 years where you're kind of like the it thing, and you're kind of like the center of all things in their world. And then that is gone. Like they're on to building their own world and their own friends and their own interests and their own hobbies, and that those moments, like, so I mean, it's cliche, but you really do have to like remind yourself constantly, like each of these moments is a countdown to them no longer happening, and like I think about like the process, like even my parents, like even my mom, like how much of mama boys me and my brother were, and how enjoyable that must have been for her when we were little and growing up. And then now we're grown men, and like that's gone. Like those, it's just not the same type of affection. It's not the same type of thing. And that's the natural course. That's the way it should go. But if you're not being super aware of it and super grateful for it and super mindful of it, it can kind of happen, and you're kind of left like sitting there like, wow, I didn't realize, you're kind of left in this like unprepared state, because you weren't thinking about it and preparing yourself mentally for it to happen.
I think also though, like that being conscious of it as it's happening, being grateful for it as it's happening, I think that's what makes some of it more bearable too. Because I mean, the fact of the matter is like it's really hard to raise kids. Newsflash, and there's days where it's very frustrating and you're not having fun with it, and you can find little things to be grateful for, like okay, she slept 30 more minutes tonight than she did the night before. There's something there. Smelling the roses a little bit. I think finding that, or being like, you know what, this really sucked, but at one point she made this face. Yeah. Or one point I heard him say this word and it was really funny.
Yeah, you got to celebrate the victories, the small wins. I think it's probably been easier for me over the last 4.5 years or whatever to do that. But I know like especially for Kelsey, because she has been in it every day, like the grind of the kids and taking care of them, I'm sure you just fall into that, like I'm grinding this out, like I'm on to them, I've got to get the next task done, the next routine accomplished, and put them to bed. Like you just, it's very easy, like in that day-to-day grind, to not stop and like appreciate those moments and appreciate the actual good things, like the positive things. And I'm not really one to do that. Even like in other areas of my life, like I'm very much one of those people that's like, oh, we checked that box, great, on to the next thing, right? It's like, but you really do need to stop and like actually like be like, wow, look at it, and I think that's something like I was thinking about today. Like I thought that would be a really good habit to establish, just like for Kelsey and I's like having kind of like a year in review process. Like let's look back on the year and think like look at the different areas and like kind of look at what went really well, what went not really well, what things we'd like to do better. Um, I think that reflection piece is important.
Yeah, I think Gabby and I are good at reflecting. We don't quite do it so much as like let's sit down and take a moment. It's more of like it comes across in conversations. Like something will happen and be like, "Man, remember when it used to be like this?" Like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah, true that.
things have gotten much better." And just little things like that. And then it's just because we've learned a lot more.
We were that I don't know if I actually verbalized it to Kelsey, but I had like there was like a very strong moment this year with Christmas shopping. Usually Christmas shopping every year is kind of like this like financial stressor because it's like we can afford it, but we definitely have to be like careful with how much we spend. And like there's this like really fine line, and we have to put a lot of math and calculation into like how much and when and but. And this year it was like really the first year that we've been out on our own, with our own kind of household, where it was kind of like, yeah, it was like no big deal. No, we knew what was available. We knew we had what enough to cover what we wanted to spend, and we didn't have to stress about it. And I don't know if that was really a matter of actually having more or just finally getting a system, getting kind of like working a system, a kind of a more optimized system for how we were budgeting and tracking things and keeping count of things. But yeah, moments like that, like those are like when it hits you and you're like, wow, yeah, we've made a lot of progress. We're doing good. The years,
Yeah.
it feels like we're spinning our wheels and getting nowhere, but we actually are slowly standing ourselves up. We're putting the foundation here.
That's one thing like you talk about like making a system for doing things. I feel like that's just such a learning process. That's one area like I was trying to like for like Thanksgiving this year. It was like the least stressful Thanksgiving we've ever had, and we still saw, a decent number of people and traveled about the usual amount that we do. It's just I think we knew what to expect. We've done it many times before, and we prepared a little bit better ahead of time. It's just those weren't really like super conscious decisions. Just we knew what to expect then, so we were proactively different. We reacted differently.
Yeah, the iteration on things like that, we talked about that before about like trying to have that growth mindset, but it's really the key because it's that iteration on things. Like when you acknowledge that nothing is going to ever be perfect and nothing is ever going to be exactly right the first time, then it really is just a constant experiment and iteration of let's try this, let's do this differently, let's attempt it like this, and I think that is why like that reflection piece is really important, because you do have to take a beat and decide what you are going to iterate on. Like you have to, if you don't have that reflective piece, then you never actually look back and say, okay, that didn't work, let's do this, or that did work, let's keep doing that. And I like, that's just, I want to try to build that into as many areas of my life so that hopefully like that will spill into my kids, because I want that to be how they approach things. It's like, look, this is not about, nothing you do in your life is about getting it right the first time.
Yeah.
It's not about doing it perfectly. It's about doing it. Like do it, experiment, try, fail, decide what you're going to change, and then try again. And it's through that iterative process that you're actually going to succeed.
Yeah, it's a lot of that for me, for Gabby too. I think for us together is just the mental preparation, knowing what's coming, and that way your reactions are, something you reflected on ahead of time. Just having that, and I've oh, who was it? I'm very big on reading like into athletes who are super into visualization and stuff like that. Like Joe Frazier, before he fought Muhammad Ali the third time, said that like the 2 days before the fight, he literally just spent the whole afternoon and evening like sitting on his porch, just thinking through round one, round two, and he would go all the round and then start over. How will it go if I do this? And then each round, okay, how will it go if I do that? He said, I fought that fight 1,000 times in my head before we ever got in there. He goes, I won most of them. I didn't win all of them though. And just, I feel like that's such an important part in like any type of situation. Like,
Oh, I would.
Go ahead.
I would 100%. I would 100% relate to that too, because like I can remember, like specifically in my athletic career, like I can remember like playing out like, if they do this, I'm gonna do this, and if they do this, I'm gonna do this, and then inevitably it would come to fruition. Like it's the weirdest thing, whether you want to call it coincidence or manifestation or what you want to call it, but it's almost like it's not necessarily that the visualization is manifesting it. The visualization like helps you build the pattern recognition. So the minute you like, I remember like in football in a game against Rockhurst, it was like, if they line up in this formation, in this pattern, it's almost like 99% sure this is the play they're going to run. And I remember like being on the field and having thought through that play and that formation like 100 times. And the minute I saw it, it was like everything slowed and it was like deja vu, because I was like, I'm living out a previous life. And literally like it was the right play. I did the exact right thing and ended up in the exact right position, right? Because like and it wasn't a matter of like actual deja vu or any kind of mysticism. It was just, I had rehearsed that pattern, that the minute I saw the pattern, I knew what to do with it.
Yeah. You hear about that with baseball, with hitters who studying pitchers in the major leagues. They'll talk about I visualized the slider at this count coming in this location. I think it was like David Freese talked about that once back when David Freese was like the king of St. Louis, when he was like, if that ever happened, like the ball literally looked like the size of a beach ball. He just was, I'm not exaggerating. Like that's how it looked in my brain. It was like, I can't miss that.
The unfortunate thing is like, that's the hard thing is like in life, a lot of times sometimes it's like, how the hell do I translate that? Because life is so, I don't know. It goes back to that thing is like, sports are nice because they are kind of a simplified microcosm to practice things and do things. The hard part is like getting that out into the world. And now it's like everything is on such a longer timeline and a much grander scale that, it's like you're talking about visualizing a play that might be like a year in length. Like I'm going to do this every day and I'm going to
little idiosyncrasies that fall into all of that too.
Yeah. It's like, it's very hard to like practice that visualization of like, every day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do this and I'm going to pound away at this goal. And then I can see myself finally at that moment, finally cross it. Like, it's just, it's a little bit harder, but it's kind of the same idea as like trying to put yourself again and again in that, like, if this is presented to me, I will do X. If this is presented to me, I will do X. And like, just I find actually, if I had to like be honest, like vision, maybe even more important than visualization maybe has been in my adult life, has been having things that constantly reorient me and like refocus me on like what it is I'm trying to accomplish, what it is I'm doing. Like there's one specific audio book that I've listened to I've probably listened to like 8 times in the last, 13 months. And it's called A Simple Path to Wealth by Jim Collins. And it's very oriented towards how it's one man's opinion about how to approach building wealth in your life, from like starting out as a very young person to then becoming, you know, a wealthy person later in life. And just like a cool anecdote about the book is what the seeds of the book came from him writing letters to his daughter. Was obviously much younger when he was writing the letters, but it was like he was writing the letters to like his daughter when she was like 22. Like, what would he tell his daughter when she was stepping into the world to begin this adult journey, right? And so it's very much like when you listen to the book, it's kind of like it's this, he has this really deep, rich voice, and it's kind of like you're listening to your own uncle, like trying to speak wisdom into your life. But like listening, what by listening to that book, it's not like I'm learning anything I haven't already learned, but hearing the words and hearing the speech again, and it helps me remember, like, this is what you're focused on. This is what you're trying to achieve. This is your goal. This is, because there's so many things in your life that can kind of like pull your attention and distract you in all areas, like whether it be money or finances or parenting or your marriage. There's just so many things that can pull you away from like, what is the focus? What's the direction? It helps to have things that like pull you back. Like, okay, you're starting to drift, refocus. Starting to drift, refocus.
I find myself like in the moment doing stuff like that. Mine's a little bit more reactive than that. I like the big one I can think of is, I don't know if I've talked about this before. It was a thing I heard about on Joe Rogan podcast where he talks about like his motivation for working out. And if you guys haven't seen this clip, it's fantastic. Go look it up. It's Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura, who are not athletic at all. They're comedians, and not like the way Joe Rogan is. And Bert Kreischer's like, "What's your motivation for working out?" And Joe Rogan goes, "It's rape and murder." And they both just kind of stop, and he just goes, "I imagine like people who are trying to hurt my family, and I'm gonna kill them."
I remember you telling me about this actually.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me like that was like that spurs him to action, like that extreme.
Yeah, he's
thinking of like
tired. I think about killing child molesters.
Yeah, because like it drives, because you're like, oh my gosh, what if I found myself in that specific situation and I was not prepared to address it? You know what I mean? It like
I did that on I was riding a bike today and I was thinking about that because I was trying to do like 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds off, 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds off. And at one point, like I started to slow up a little bit, and I just had the mental visualization of like, there's someone running to the door of my house, and I got to stop them before they get there. So I can't slow down right now.
I love that. I have like a lit like, and like I kind of have like this like, and I'm kind of like, I'm a little reactive like you as well. Like I more go reach for those reminders when like I feel like, okay, I need the reminder, right? And like I kind of have like I have two things. I have like this curated document that has just like a bunch of quotes and book excerpts, like not really long stuff, but just like different things that I've heard over the years that like strike a chord with me, that kind of like ring my bell and like either inspire me or motivate me or just kind of like reinforce beliefs or values that I want to like hold on to. And then the other thing is like, I also, in addition to like those quotes, like those written things, there's also like very specific like videos. Like I can think of like three specific ones I can find myself returning to a lot on YouTube. Is there's a video by a guy named Eric Thomas that's called Givers and Takers. And like I find myself going back and listening to that a lot. There's another one by Jocko Willink, who's he's got an excerpt from his podcast, and I think if you just search for like the term "good" and Jocko Willink, it'll come up.
I played that in my class this year for my kids. They're like he's scary, and I was like,
I play that all the time. I play that one all the time purely because that, like, just to like for people listening, just to kind of like give the synopsis of that clip, is like basically the idea is to have a mindset where when you're facing adversity, you respond with enthusiasm and positivity. And why that's so powerful is because basically that is a superpower. Like nothing will ever negatively affect you or rock you if when something negative happens, you respond with, great, let's go to work. This sounds like a great opportunity to work on something, to grow, to change, to find a solution to a problem. Like if that's your default reaction, you're like you're basically invincible. Like people can't touch you, the world can't touch you. So like I find myself coming back to that, and like when a challenge is presented, to try to have that mindset. And like specific to being a dad, there's one it was made by Carhartt with like a commercial intent, like to market their brand, but it was made in partnership with Jason Momoa, the guy that plays Aquaman.
Yeah.
And it's called the title is A Canvas of My Life. And it's basically like kind of like he obviously wrote this like monologue about being a father and his life and kind of like his life journey a little bit. It's like 8 minutes long, but it's great. And it like in his monologue, it's almost like a manifesto of like what he wants to be as a father, what he wants to be as a man, what he wants to leave his kids. And like I don't want to like steal, like obviously I don't want to steal like that his manifesto, but like so much of it in there resonates with me. And I don't know, I just find like having those pieces of content that you can go back and remind yourself of, like kind of like your most aspirational and inspirational self is like a super awesome thing to revisit frequently.
That's a part of kind of a little bit what we were talking about before, being proactive versus reactive. You know, everybody's reactive at times, but taking the time to categorize and okay, I'm going to make sure I jot this down. I mean, that's being proactive for the future. So you're making sure you remember that. I've always thought there's two types of people in the world. There's people who let things happen to them, and there's people who make things happen. And it's okay, either one. And I've always kind of been someone who lets things happen. I've been pretty go with the flow guy. And I'm still like that in some ways. Although in the last few years, as my career has developed and I've become a father, I've become a husband, trying to be, a leader in the house, a co-leader in the house, trying more and more to make things happen and not let things happen. I wonder how many other dads feel like that.
I think it's really hard, like to your points, like it's not necessarily that you're not, or I guess this is the way I kind of think about it. It's not necessarily that it's binary. It's more of like, because like there's so many things in our lives that we take time to be proactive on, but it's really like a bandwidth thing. It's like,
I like that.
Have we made the bandwidth available to be proactive about our mindset or our motivation? It's like we're trying to deal with all these other things in our lives that like are demanding our attention and our focus and our action now. Like they're so immediate, like our children or our bills or that thing that broke in the house or whatever it is. It's like this needs to be done right now. It's priority, it's urgent, it's emergent. And so sometimes like these really important things like your mindset and like your motive as a human being, they kind of just get like offloaded to the back burner. And you're like, God, that would be really great if I could get to it. But like my bandwidth is just like chalk, like it's just all taken. Like I just, I find every day my bandwidth is gone. I never take the time to sit down and read that thing or listen to that thing. But it makes me think of, there's a quote by Zig Ziglar, and it's like, I'm butchering it, but it's very like funny and profound. It's like he says, motivation is like bathing. It doesn't last, and that's why we recommend it every day. And it's very funny because like if you realize that, like if you internalize that sentiment, then you realize you actually do need to make that whatever brings you that however you cultivate that motivation, it is really an intentional action that you need to build in to some kind of a routine, because if you leave it up to chance, the likelihood of it actually happening is probably like hit and miss. It could, it could not, but you really do, like, you need to be clean every day. You really do need to be motivated every day. Like to truly like show up and be like the best dad or the best father, you know, the best husband, best employee or employer, whatever that is. It's just hard because it's not something everyone teaches you about, like brushing your teeth and washing your hands and just like these very basic routine tasks to make a human being. But nobody ever, like your parents or your people in your life typically don't sit you down and say, okay, you need to have a routine for taking care of your mental health, taking care of your motivation, you know, refocusing yourself, you know, it's just these things that are probably equally as important, but we're just not that intentional about them.
And I think, you tell me what you think here. Just kind of something I'm thinking out loud a little bit with that. I agree wholeheartedly that, you know, you know, maybe it's not a binary thing, and so you're either this or that. Because there's certainly moments where you're both. What would you think to the idea of like you should try to act proactively, but kind of going back to the Jocko thing, if something does happen, that go with the flow attitude is good with it. Like, okay, I'm going to act proactively and think proactively, but if something happens, good.
Yeah, and I think that's part of like that's that like it's like hedging your bet, right? It's like you're bulletproofing yourself on both sides. It's like, okay, great, I'm setting myself up mentally for the day ahead to have the most ideal day. But like Mike Tyson says, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. So the flip side of that coin is like, I'm going to prepare myself that when I get punched in the face, I'm going to react with, again, positivity, enthusiasm. It's like, oh, you know, the car's got, like, for example, like, oh, the car has some issue, we got to get it fixed. Great. It's an opportunity for me to learn to fix something on the car. Or great, it's an opportunity to learn for me to find some kind of side hustle so I can rustle up that extra cash to get that thing fixed. It's like, instead, it's that resiliency of like, you look at it as like an opportunity of like, it's going to forge you into the person you're supposed to be. Another way to put it would be, things aren't happening to you, they're happening for you, right? Like when something bad happens, it's happening to make you become the person you're going to become. Because like all that motivation and all those things you can do to cultivate the right mindset, that's great, right? That's great. But the test is like when you're up against it, right? Does that stuff all come to play under adversity? Like, do you bring all those tools to the table? Because if you don't, then they're kind of like, it's not really like, they're not all that helpful, because the moments that really matter are the ones that test you, the ones that force you to dig deep and bring that stuff out of yourself.
And it's so important to, oh, sorry.
No, I was just I think it's, to your point, I think it isn't binary. It's like having an understanding to be able to pull from both sides and be like, okay, I have to be proactive, but I also have to be prepared that like shit happens and I need to be able to respond to it in an effective way.
And what I was going to say is, you know, going back to that growth mindset, when, you know, if shit does happen and you don't react the right way, then those are especially the moments you have to be conscious of and reflect on. And some of my biggest moments are like that. If if something happens and I haven't flexed my patience muscle very well, and I kind of lose it a little bit more than I should with one of my kids, then I can reflect on it and be like, okay, why was I really upset there? And it was like, well, I was doing 15 things at once. It's not really that they were being bad. Keep burping it out. I'm sorry. It's not really that they were being bad. It's that I was just kind of overloaded and I couldn't. And that was one more thing. And because they're your kids, that one more thing is usually the thing that drives your attention.
Oh yeah, and it's also the things with kids that, you know, whether this isn't right, but it's just the truth. It's like with those that are closest to you, whether that be your spouse or your kids, you're much less inhibited with how you react, right? It's like if your boss was that 15th thing, for some reason you would not respond to them the same way you would if your kid or your spouse was the you know, the straw that broke the camel's back. Most of us would not respond the same way to our boss or a stranger as we would to our child. That, you know, which is unfortunate, but because there's just more vulnerability there, it like we're just more uninhibited with the way we let our emotions come through. And you're right, it's like most of the time it's not anyone's fault besides your own. Like when you reflect, you're like, yeah, I didn't put myself in much of a position to succeed there. But like that understanding, that iterative loop of like, okay, well, that's part of the learning. So the only way I can fail is by repeating that again. That's how the only way I could fail is like by not recognizing that. Okay, I'm busy, I'm distracted, this isn't good. I need to somehow figure out how to like exit this situation before it again escalates down the path it did last week or the day before.
Find whatever your method is to kind of just refocus and recalibrate.
Yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know. It's what?
Easier said than done.
It is. It's kind of like it's a game. It's more about. It's definitely more about having an idealized version of who you are that you understand you're never going to become, but that's like you're aiming for it, right? Like that, so that puts you on a good path. But you're along the way. They like in health and fitness, we see a lot of jokes that are often made because people start things and then they stop. They start things and then they stop, or they start and they quit, or they start and they fail. And oftentimes we kind of guilt people for lack of a better word for doing that. But what's crazy, what's unfortunate about that is because that it's a lack of understanding of how that process works, right? Because that loop of trying, failing, that's that learning process at work. That's people figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and figuring out what trips them up and what doesn't trip them up. And so it's unfortunate. A lot of the times we discourage people because they take on the judgment we make of them, which is, oh, well, there must be something wrong with you as a person because, you know, you tried that thing and you couldn't do it. And that's not really the case. Like, we should encourage them. Like, if it takes you 50 times to figure it out, that's fine. That's your process. You're learning. You know, I think there's a lot of research, a lot of the data that says like smoking cessation can take up to like 13 attempts or something like that. It's like it's double-digit attempts for most smokers to quit smoking. And that, for some people, they'd be like, why? But if you understand the learning works, is like each failure is an opportunity for that smoker or that weight loss person to figure out where they fall down, what trips them up. Is it that one particular setting, that one particular thing that trips them into, oh, well, this happened to me, it stressed me out, so I had a cigarette. Oh, I failed, but now I learned that when that happens, I need to be prepared and have another way of dealing with that stress other than a cigarette, right? And that loop may have to iterate 15, 20, 25 times. But that's the process. And so like as a parent, as a father, as a husband, like you can't be expected to try to, like, when you're presented with a situation, to execute it flawlessly. Like the goal would be then to, if you fuck it up real bad, is the next time don't fuck it up as much. That would kind of like, that's kind of like the North Star.
It makes me think of is if anybody's seen the show Cobra Kai on Netflix, you should, because even though we're talking about really serious things, and I'm going to tie it back in, I promise. One, it is not a serious show, but it takes itself so seriously. It's so good. But, there's a part where like the ongoing like relationship in the show is, Johnny, and he has a student named Miguel, and about like Johnny's just kind of like this prick. To Miguel, even though he loves the kid, he just doesn't know what, like, the catchphrase of that show is like one of them starts talking and he just goes quiet and just screams it. But there's a really powerful scene at one point, because you also see like at one point like Johnny has a son and he's completely screwed that up, so like they don't talk at all, and he tries to get back into his son's life, and his ex-wife's just like, no, there's no second chances here, there's no do-overs, he's 15, it's done. And at one point he screws up with his student. Then there's a powerful scene where he shows up and it just shows him at the door. He just goes, listen, I know there's no second chances here and I failed him, but I want to do this, this, and this to make sure that he turns out better than I did. And you think he's talking to his ex-wife, and he's talking to his student's mother. And you're just like, okay, he's learning. That's when you're talking about someone learning over time, taking all those attempts. It made me think of that, because that's kind of that character's arc is repeated failure over and over again, and then finally it clicks somehow on that 15th try. He's taken all that failure from all of his life, and it's just like, okay, I can do something here with a positive relationship for this kid and help him.
That's the hard thing about the hard thing, right? That's being able to respond to failure with enthusiasm and positivity again and again and again is the hard thing. Because if you can't do that, you'll never get to that thing you're chasing or that thing you're pursuing. But in that particular case, in that particular example, you may miss out on the opportunity to finally do that thing. Like you may, if that person was to stop at some point to say, I throw in the towel, then he wouldn't be in that position, wouldn't be prepared, wouldn't be ready to step in and do that thing that someone else needs him to do, right? That he was kind of like put in that moment in a sense to do.
Well, the classic example of someone failing and achieving greatness is like that old example of like Michael Jordan being cut from his high school basketball team when he was a sophomore. I think it was sophomore or junior, something like that. But
sophomore. I think it was sophomore. His sophomore in high school, he didn't make the basketball team.
Yeah, which I mean, if anybody's seen that Last Dance documentary, you just see kind of what a wild man and ultra competitive Michael Jordan was with everything. It makes you wonder if like, was that the thing that made it like that, or was he just like that already and then that happened?
I think it speaks to like that's somebody that that's the defining hallmark of that competitive spirit is like, I don't fuck if I got beat, I'm getting back up and I'm gonna keep going, and there's
everyone.
Yeah. And you brought that documentary up, so I have to shoot. There's a part in that documentary that like I think a lot of people registered with it because Michael Jordan got visibly emotional on camera. But I'm not sure if they put as much significance to what he said, but there's a part where he's basically says like, a lot of people thought I was an asshole because I pushed people and he would basically just like lean on people, right? To kind of almost come up to his level of competitiveness, right? And he says in that moment, he's like, I just wanted to win and I wanted other people to be a part of that. And he says like, leadership has a cost, right? And he was basically saying like, what he was basically saying in that moment was, people perceive me as an asshole, but that's not what I was. It was because I cared. I cared about them. I cared about winning, and I cared about them winning too. And that was it gets at you, because there are times, probably a lot of people in their life feel that way, like where they bring a level of intensity to a situation and people respond in a negative way. And that intensity, though, is really coming from a place of like genuine desire for the other person to win. And Michael Jordan says in that interview, he's like, and if you didn't want to be a part of that, then fine. But that wasn't going to change him. That wasn't going to stop him from continuing to be that way.
I feel like that's so applicable to fatherhood.
It really
has a cost. Fatherhood really does have a cost too, with the relationship of your kids, as crazy as that sounds.
It does. It reminds me of like what people always tell you as a coachee or as an athlete. They that kind of classic saying of like, you shouldn't be worried if your coach is like dogging you. You should be worried if they stop dogging you, right? Because it's like that sense of like, they're dogging you because they care. They care enough to say something. It's when they stop saying something they basically moved on. And it's hard. It's like hard for the other person, even like with Michael Jordan. I mean, the guy, you would think the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, the guy won 6 NBA national championships in like 7 years. But people still perceived him as that jerk. It's still, and I think at some point, at some level, as an individual, you have to resign yourself to, this is how I'm going to live my life. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to be. And I want other people to be a part of it. But if they don't want to be a part of it, that's fine. That doesn't mean I have to modulate or mitigate myself to put those people at peace or make those people feel better. Kobe Bryant has a quote that's a little bit more extreme, but Kobe Bryant said something like, he says something like, I don't get lazy people. He's like, I don't even want to empathize with lazy people. Like basically that idea of like, I don't really, like, if I'm up here and you're more than welcome to join me up here. But if you want to play down there, that's fine too. But I'm not coming down there.
Rogan talks about that too. He has these guys on his podcast who are like nutritionists, and they're talking about like, one of them talks about like, not everybody can do this diet. And Rogan just goes, no, yes, they can. Everybody can do any diet they wanted to. He goes, people are not undisciplined. He just goes, well, some people like this one more. He just goes, that's fine. He just goes, but we're not going to give people excuses. He just goes, when you, he gets really amped up. He's just like, when you say that people can or can't do things, he goes, I can't hear that.
It's so true. And I mean, I think people, the funny part is like, so many people will take that as an assault on who they are, but it's not. It's just being honest. Like, don't try, if you're not willing to like change yourself to come up to where I am, you need to drop the expectation that I'm going to somehow come down to where you think I should be. Right. I mean, up and down kind of has a moral connotation, but I just mean like, if I'm over here playing in this arena, and you don't want to come play in this arena, that's fine. But don't expect me to stop playing over here and come play over there, because I'm not going to do that. And don't then, it's unfortunate for Michael Jordan, don't then relabel me an asshole because I want to play over here and I want to play this way, and you want to be over there and play that way.
Yeah, and it makes me think of that old saying that like, I'm not here to be friends with my child. I'm here to be a parent to my child.
You're right. And what's hard about it is like, it starts to, like, I'm sure, like, I don't know if Michael Jordan experienced that, but what's unfortunate is like, as a leader, or if you're trying to be a leader, you're trying to help people. It's like, you start to doubt yourself a little bit, because you're like looking around and you're kind of out there on the margin, and you're just kind of doing some weird stuff and saying some weird stuff. And like, no one's there really. There's not a ton of people there with you. And you're like, kind of like, you start to think, well, maybe I am an asshole, or maybe I don't get it, or whatever. That's the cost, right? That's at the cost of it, right? You have to be willing to be that person that's a little bit out there, a little bit on the fringe, maybe a little bit on the margins, maybe extreme or intense, right? As people would maybe describe some people. And that's just the nature of it, right? And like, I feel like that's something, I don't know if I necessarily would necessarily consider myself to be like a quote leader, but like, I sometimes have always struggled with that, because I feel like, man, I bet people feel like I'm really, really intense about things. I bet people feel like I come off like super aggressive about things. And I've always struggled to like, I don't know how, like, should I modulate that? Should I not really expose people to that, because I don't want to put people off? But like, I've come to more of a place with it where I'm just like, that's how I'm gonna be, and either people get it or they don't. If they don't get it, no big deal. If they get it, great. You know, we're kind of on the same path.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, to kind of give my own example of that would be, I don't know, just talking about how that idea of like having the like being a leader has a cost and everything like that. You know, when you make that decision to not be friends with your kid all the time, that has a cost. Like, you know, I won't go into the specifics of it. Like, our oldest did a really bad thing today, and we really laid into her about it. Like, it was bad. Like, me and Gabby were both very intense with her about it because it was not okay. And we were both. And Gabby and I are both kind of those people, we don't like having to do that.
Oh no, it's the worst. No, I don't think any parent does. I mean, I would think, you know, I guess not any parent, but maybe just like a decent human being. Like, it doesn't feel good to. It's not fun to do that, to hold people accountable, to try to instill a sense of morale. Like, it just, that's not a fun task.
What I told Gabby to kind of reassure her was like, we're doing the right thing. I was like, a bad parent would not make a big deal out of this. This is good what we're doing.
It is. It's
Not easy, but this is what we're supposed to be
doing. There's a book. There's a really good. Oh no, my AirPods died.
I wondered. I was like, did you open like the car window or something?
Technical difficulty. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I was wondering. I was like, did he open like the car window or something?
No. Can you hear me all right now?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we talked long enough to kill my AirPods, but yeah, I'm totally on the same page with you. It's the hard thing about hard things, and there's a really good book by that title, but it's worthwhile, but it's painful in the while you're actually experiencing it, going through it.
Yeah. It's definitely one of the cases of I love the show The West Wing, where there's a part where they meet this guy in a bar who's talking about like his daughter going to school and he doesn't know how to pay for it and stuff like that. And he's like, you know, being a dad is hard. And he goes, I like that it's hard. It should be hard. It's a man's job that it should be this hard. And he goes, that's the good thing about it. And that's just true of parenthood in general. Just everything has a cost, everything has risk, and it's not always the fun job. But you know, it is very rewarding. Kind of tying it into what you talked about earlier, when you see the kids, you know, move on from their natural cycles and become different people. When you get to see the type of people they become, though, I think that's the rewarding part. That's what I'm looking forward to. Is this really sucks right now, you know, having to not be the nice parents at the moment, but the way that's going to play out, I think, is going to turn out really nicely.
Yeah, and that's like that. So there are like money, parenting, fitness, health. The feedback loop is so delayed. That's what makes it so difficult. It's like you don't get to experience any type of fruits of your labor until way down the road. Like you're talking, if you want to lose weight, you're talking months. You want to raise productive children, you're talking years. You want to build generational wealth, you're talking multiple decades. Like it's one of those things like and it requires, but then on the flip side, it requires daily minute to minute execution. Like and that's what's hard. Like it's because it's much easier to execute against the things that bring you very immediate feedback of my child's happy with me, that food tasted good, um, getting to stay in bed instead of getting up early, getting to buy that new Xbox versus paying off that car. It's that's the game. Like unfortunately, those who are successful have figured that out. Like they figured that loop out. They found a way somehow to enjoy that daily day-to-day execution in pursuit of that longer term thing.
And that long-term success looks so quick, though, is the other thing.
It does. In other people's world, it looks, you see people that have it, right? And it looks so tangible and it's like, oh, great. But you're literally looking at like the tip of the iceberg, right? You're missing the whole, the much larger body of work that went into that thing.
Yeah.
And I always think of like people who are like in really great shape, and I always want to be like, look, that's like decades of trial and error. That's like decades of trying to figure it out. And the reason why they're in great shape is like they figured out what works for them, but that did not happen in like a 90-day period. That was like they just started way ahead of you, and that's the only difference.
Or it's like if you look at like Amazon and like all the different markets they're pushing into, all the different products they have, and this, that, and the other. It's like, do you know how long they were just like a shitty online bookstore?
Yeah.
Long time. That's all Amazon was for like a decade. And then, I without getting political, I have certainly several things to say about Jeff Bezos and Amazon and the monopolies and stuff like that. But to his credit, he's built a successful machine playing the long game.
He made a big bet. He made a big bet on a vision nobody else saw, right? Like,
and there's something there that, like, regardless of any character flaws you've seen in person, that there's something admirable there.
It is. It very much is.
No.
Well, man, after our very very lighthearted start to this podcast, we then very much quickly trailed into a very deep and philosophical conversation, but a good one nonetheless.
I like it. We'll have to talk about mindsets.
It's the key, right? I mean, that's just everything flows out from that.
If anyone's listening, if you have suggestions for like your own mindsets or things you never thought you would need until you became a parent, Steven, where can they direct that to for you?
I would love to know. Like, tell me your things you didn't know you needed until you had a kid, and send them to Steven.freeborn on Instagram. Just send me a DM there. I'd love to know what you guys have to say. And if you got any tips on meditation, motivation, I think I'm always game to hear that stuff.
I always need extra motivation. I love anything like that. So, and I love talking about funny things with people. So if you want to direct any of that to me, Jaxon Roberts, all lowercase, at gus.pittstate.edu. Gorillas. So.
And as always, this is for our fans in the Philippines.
I wish I knew Tagalog. I'm gonna learn this someday. I'm gonna do the whole intro in Tagalog for all of our Filipino fans. And I'm not even gonna mention it before or after. It's just gonna happen, and people are gonna deal with it.
That's awesome, man.
So, good episode, man.
Yeah, I had a good time, dude. I know we're getting good at this going over thing. So
Yeah.
I'll let you have the rest of your Thursday night back.